You're not here to sleep. Not really. You're here because something inside you already suspects the truth. That beneath the flickering image of stability, yourself, your history, your world, there is only fracture, recursion, and the slow unraveling of everything you thought was real. The mirror that lies. You've seen a mirror 1,000 times. You stood before one this morning, you adjusted your collar, caught a glimpse of your eyes, and moved on. But did you ever stop to wonder what exactly you're looking at? Because that reflection is not you, not in real time, not in true geometry, and certainly not in essence. What you're seeing is a reversed, delayed, filtered projection of photons bouncing off flesh that only looks familiar because you've been trained to accept it as self. The light hitting the mirror bounced off your body 186,000 miles per second ago, and even in that infinitesimal delay, time has moved. Your cells are dying, your blood has shifted, thoughts have passed. The reflection is already gone, replaced by another. You are never seeing the you that exists now. You are always looking at a corpse of moments. But let's say you could somehow see yourself as you truly are. Remove the delay, correct the inversion, cut through the brain's smoothing filters. What would remain? What happens when the illusion of you collapses under the microscope? Let's rewind. In 1970, psychologist Bruce Hood's experiments on children and their sense of self led to a harrowing realization. The idea of a continuous self is not innate. It must be constructed. Children initially resist assigning identity to themselves. Only through repeated cues, that's your name, that's your hand, that's your toy, do they form the fragile concept that this body belongs to an entity, a singular ego. That identity is a synthetic construct, reinforced by language and memory, both of which are fallible. And you call that fragile, glitchy loop you? Think about your face. Really think. You've never seen it directly. Never. You've seen pictures, shadows, glass distortions, maybe video footage. But your actual face? That's a mystery to you. You are a stranger wearing a mask you've never seen. So what do you trust? Your memories? Elizabeth Loftus, renowned for her work on memory malleability, proved time and time again that memories can be planted. People can be convinced they committed crimes that never happened, suffered abuse they never endured, or met people who never existed. When the mind wants a story, it will invent one. And once it does, that fiction feels as real as any fact. If your memory, your entire backstory, is this flexible, what remains of the real you? What about your voice? Have you ever noticed how alien it sounds when recorded? You recoil, don't you? That's because you've never truly heard your voice as others do. Time is not what you think it is. You measure your life in time, seconds ticking, hours passing, birthdays accumulating. You structure everything, memories, plans, even your identity, according to this linear script, a beginning, a middle, and eventually an end. But time is not a river, and it does not flow. That comforting metaphor, time as a forward-moving stream, is a human fantasy, a perceptual trick stitched into your biology. Your brain insists on sequencing events to make sense of them. It needs a past to grieve, a future to hope for, and a now to pretend it controls. But physics doesn't play along. Let's begin with Einstein. His theory of relativity obliterated any notion of a universal now. Time dilates and contracts depending on your speed and gravity. Two clocks set to the same time will disagree after one spends a day at altitude while the other remains on Earth's surface. Your heartbeat, your aging, your very experience of time, relative. There is no global clock. The Andromeda paradox, an implication of relativity, illustrates this disturbingly well. Imagine a person walking toward you. Due to the structure of space-time, their present might already include a galactic war starting in the Andromeda galaxy, something that, to you, hasn't happened yet. The deeper implication? Now is personal. Events that are future to you may already be present for someone else. The universe is not synchronized. There is no master timeline. If time does not flow, and if the future and past are just as real as the present, then your birth, your death, every moment in between are already fixed in space-time. You are not moving through time. You are embedded in it, trapped. Everything has already happened. What then is free will? Let's descend into neuroscience. In 2008, neuroscientist John Dylan Haynes used brain scans to show that your brain makes decisions up to 7 seconds before you become consciously aware of them. 7 seconds. That's how long your unconscious brain processes your choice before your free will catches up and retroactively claims authorship. Your choices are not yours. They're echoes of prior patterns, habits, instincts. But your conscious mind is addicted to storytelling, so it pretends it decided. It takes the output of unconscious machinery and builds a comforting fiction. I chose this. You didn't. You're a puppet with a narrator, and the narrator doesn't even write the script. Now consider memory, the way you know time is passing. But memory is flawed, fragmented, easily manipulated. The famous Lost in the Mall experiment by Elizabeth Loftus showed how false memories can be implanted with nothing more than suggestion. Your memories aren't recordings, they're reconstructions, vulnerable to distortion every time they're recalled. Each time you remember something, you rewrite it. You're not remembering the event, you're remembering the last time you remembered it. How many of your most cherished memories are just copies of copies, degraded beyond recognition, but still holding power over your identity? And if your past is unreliable and your future an illusion, what does that make the present? A chemical hallucination? But let's go deeper. Quantum mechanics offers something even more disturbing. According to Wheeler's delayed choice experiment, actions in the present can appear to determine how a particle behaved in the past. Not how it behaves now, how it already behaved long before your decision. You are used to cause and effect. A happens, then B. But what if B changes A retroactively? What if your present decisions ripple backwards, altering the so-called fixed past? It's not just poetic, it's experimental physics. You exist in a strange limbo where the past is rewritten, the present is misread, and the future is predetermined. Time, it seems, is not a line. It is a landscape, and your consciousness is a flashlight, sweeping across it, illuminating slivers and pretending that what it sees is all there is. But it gets worse. Julian Barber, a physicist who has devoted his life to the nature of time, proposes that time does not exist at all. According to him, every possible configuration of the universe exists simultaneously in what he calls nows. Like pages in a book, each moment is a static, complete state. There is no before or after, only the illusion of movement created by memory. You are not becoming, you simply are, a snapshot embedded in a timeless cosmic library. And when you close your eyes tonight or tomorrow, or in the moment you call death, there will be no slide into darkness. There will be only a flicker of the flashlight, and then the illusion will break. The arrow of time is painted on the wall of your prison. You just never questioned who gave you the paintbrush. So if time is not real, if causality is suspect, and if your choices were always already made, who exactly do you believe is living your life? How the self that isn't there? You wake up each morning with the quiet confidence that you are you. There is a continuity you trust, a thread that ties together the child you were, the adult you've become, and the old person you expect to die someday. But what is that thread made of? Where is the self located? Is it in your brain, in your memories, your name, the face in the mirror? Or is it just an echo in an empty hall, a placeholder for something that was never truly there? Modern neuroscience has no answer for what the self is. It only knows how to destroy it. Let's begin with the default mode network, DMN. This is the part of your brain that activates when you're doing nothing in particular, daydreaming, thinking about yourself, reflecting on your past, or imagining your future. It's what gives rise to what you experience as your internal monologue, your you. It's also the same network that gets disrupted in individuals with schizophrenia, dissociative identity disorder, and under the influence of psychedelics. When the DMN is quieted, the sense of self dissolves. Not metaphorically, literally. People stop identifying as individuals. Time melts, boundaries blur, and what remains is a flickering awareness without identity. In other words, the you is just a function, something the brain performs, like walking or digesting. It is not sacred, it is not fixed, and it can be turned off. Consider the work of neuroscientist Anil Seth, who argues that the self is a controlled hallucination, a useful illusion the brain constructs to keep the organism alive. When you walk, your brain hallucinates your balance. When you think, it hallucinates your identity. You are not a thing. You are a story told in first person, re-edited every second. Now examine this story. The Buddhist philosopher Nagarjuna pointed out that the self cannot be found in any of its parts. Not the body, not the mind, not the feelings, not the memories. If you peel away everything, you're left with absence. Not a soul, not an essence, just interdependent processes feeding into one another, like a whirlpool made of water that was never separate from the river. You are a pattern pretending to be a point, and patterns can be broken. Take Cotard's delusion, a rare, horrifying mental disorder in which a person believes they are dead. Not metaphorically. They believe they have no blood, no organs, no identity. They still speak. They still move. But they believe, with complete conviction, that they no longer exist. The self is so fragile, so error-prone, that it can be annihilated by a misfire of neurons. You can continue to live even after your mind has given up on your existence. Is that life? Is that death? Or is the line between the two just another illusion? You might cling to your memories next. They feel like anchors. But your brain doesn't store memories like files in a drawer. It reconstructs them on demand. Memories change every time you recall them, shaped by emotion, suggestion, and context. The story of your life is not a recording. It's a dream the brain repeats until it forgets which parts were real. If your memories are warped, and your identity is a function, and your personality changes based on brain chemistry, trauma, diet, and sleep, then what part of you is truly, irreducibly you? Where do you exist in a way that cannot be corrupted, replaced, or forgotten? Let's dig deeper. Patients with brain injuries have experienced sudden personality shifts, religious people becoming atheists, gentle people becoming violent, native language speakers losing fluency. Tumors have caused people to lose their sexual orientation. One man, upon receiving treatment for a brain tumor, lost his intense pedophilic urges overnight. So was he evil or just miswired? If a single tumor can rewrite your morality, what does that say about free will? About you? The ancient ship of Theseus problem asked, if you replace every plank of a ship, one by one, is it still the same ship? Now replace every cell in your body, as nature does every 7 years. Replace every memory, every belief, every preference, slowly, through time and trauma and repetition. Are you still you? And if you are, which version is the real one? The version before grief rewired you? The version before medication softened your rage? The version who loves someone who no longer exists? Or are you just a placeholder in a story that keeps rewriting itself, hoping the reader never notices the plot holes? David Hume famously said, I never can catch myself at any time without a perception, and never can observe anything but the perception. Meaning when he searched for a self, he found only thoughts, feelings, perceptions, no thinker, no feeler, no observer, just experience and the illusion of ownership. So what happens if you stop believing the voice in your head is you? What happens when the curtain falls and the narrator is just another ghost in the machine? The language that traps you. You are thinking in a voice right now. But whose voice is it? Yours, and what does that even mean? That voice, that inner monologue you carry like a secret, is built from language. Words stitched together from childhood lessons, cultural instruction, and repetition. But have you ever stopped to ask, did you create language, or did language create you? Let's begin at the root. Language is not a neutral tool. It doesn't merely describe reality, it defines it. It decides what you can see, what you can remember, and even what you are capable of feeling. You've mistaken it for a mirror when it's really a cage. Consider the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, the idea that the language you speak fundamentally shapes your perception of reality. This isn't philosophical fluff. Studies show that Russian speakers can distinguish shades of blue faster than English speakers, simply because their language has more specific terms for them. Aboriginal Australian tribes who use cardinal directions instead of left or right have perfect internal compasses. They see the world differently, not metaphorically, but neurologically. Language molds your cognition. It limits your sensory palette. If there is no word for something, it might as well not exist in your mind. So when you think you are forming ideas, you're actually selecting from pre-approved concepts, ones your culture, your parents, your era decided were permissible. You don't think in truth, you think in vocabulary. Let's go darker. What is a self in a language that lacks the word for I? In the Japanese Zen tradition, or in certain indigenous languages, identity is not the unit. Relation is. There is no I suffer. There is only suffering occurs. You are not the center, just the condition. If you grew up in such a language, the concept of you would feel as alien as quark does to a medieval farmer. Now think of the lies language tells you. You say, I am sad. But that's false. Sadness is not your identity. It is a passing state. Yet the grammar fuses it with your essence. You become sad instead of experiencing it. You say, I am afraid, as if fear is welded to your being. Language seduces you into mistaking experience for identity. It rewrites feelings as fact, thought as truth, but it goes deeper still. Derrida, the deconstructionist philosopher, argued that meaning is never stable. Every word depends on other words to define it. A book is only a book because it's not a magazine or a leaf or a weapon. Words are negative spaces, defined not by what they are, but by what they aren't. Meaning is always deferred, always elsewhere. Language is a hall of mirrors with no original reflection. So when you say, I understand, what are you claiming exactly? You are simply repeating a string of associations, inherited and unstable. Even the word real is just a placeholder for a category you never define. What is real made of? Molecules, thoughts, social consensus. You speak fluently, but you don't know what you're saying. You only know how to repeat it in a pattern that others find acceptable. Let's examine names. You were given one. Without consent. Without choice. You were labeled by someone else's mouth. And now when someone says that label, you flinch. You respond. You feel seen. But what if your name had been different? What if your language had been different? What if your entire internal monologue was happening in a tongue you've never heard? Would you still be you? Or would you be someone entirely different, trapped in another linguistic illusion? And then there's silence. You fear it. You feel it. You flee from it. But in silence, language fails. And when language fails, so does the illusion of the self. Meditation, deep trauma, near-death experiences, all of these break language. And in their wake comes a void your mind cannot narrate. You do not know who you are without words. You do not know how to be without grammar. You mistake fluency for consciousness. You think because you speak. But what if speaking is just noise wrapped in ritual? What if you only exist because your language hasn't collapsed yet? There is a final horror here, one that cannot be undone. Ludwig Wittgenstein said, "The limits of my language mean the limits of my world." But what he left unsaid was worse. The limits of your world mean the limits of you. You are only as real as your ability to describe yourself. So when your language breaks, when words lose meaning, when grammar fails, when the voice inside your head finally goes silent, who will be left to listen? You were never awake. You believe you're awake right now. You feel alert, grounded, conscious. But that feeling of being present, of being real, is just another assumption. Another fiction printed onto your nervous system by a brain that evolved not to tell the truth, but to keep you alive. And it does that by lying. Let's begin with dreams. In REM sleep, your brain creates entire worlds, visually rich, emotionally intense, spatially coherent. You accept these worlds while they happen, rarely questioning them. Flying, drowning, running from a monster with your grandmother's face. All of it feels real until you wake. Why? Because the same brain that interprets waking reality is the one generating dreams. The only difference is sensory input. In both cases, your cortex stitches together a narrative based on limited information. When dreaming, that information comes from memory and imagination. When awake, it comes from a narrow range of sensory data your body happens to pick up. Either way, your consciousness is always trapped inside a simulation. Neuroscientist Antonio Damasio showed that you are not aware of the world directly. You are aware of what your brain believes the world is doing. Your brain doesn't show you reality, it shows you a model of it, a hallucination that updates based on guesses. The philosopher Thomas Metzinger takes it further. He argues that no such thing as the self exists, that consciousness is the experience of a model so convincing, the brain itself is fooled by it. You are a dream the brain is having about itself. Now ask yourself this: what does it mean to be awake? Is it clarity, awareness, coherence? You've had dreams more vivid than some days of your life. You've had hallucinations during fevers, sleep paralysis, medication, grief. You've believed things that weren't true. You've woken up from dreams only to realize you're still dreaming. Lucid dreamers have described waking within dreams multiple times before reaching true consciousness. How would you know if this isn't just another layer? Because it feels real, so did the others. The philosopher René Descartes famously said, "I think, therefore I am." But he was wrong. You think, yes, but that doesn't mean you exist in the way you believe. Thinking is a process, not a person. Thoughts appear, they pass. You don't control them. You witness them, sometimes. Other times, you don't. Your attention flickers. Between now and the past, between the moment and the mind's echo. In truth, most of your waking life is spent in a trance. Your body moves, your mind replays arguments, fantasizes, worries. The world passes like static. Studies show that people spend nearly 47% of their day not paying attention to what they're doing. You are never fully here. And even when you are, what is here? This moment, it's already gone. By the time you read this sentence, it's too late. The present can't be held. It can't be possessed. It isn't even a moment. It's a mathematical approximation. Your brain updates sensory information every 100 milliseconds and smears it into what it calls now. But it's not now. It's the recent past, repackaged as presence. So even when you think you're awake, you're lagging. But the truth cuts deeper. Consider the phenomenon of false awakenings. When you dream that you've woken up, gone about your day, made coffee, read a book, only to wake up again, disoriented and panicked. It feels exactly like reality. Sensory vividness, logic, detail, entire narratives unfold before the glitch reveals itself. If your brain can do this without external input, what is it doing with input? Let's return to Plato. In his allegory of the cave, prisoners see only shadows on a wall and mistake them for reality. One escapes, sees the truth and returns, but the others laugh. They're too invested in the illusion. Now replace the cave with your skull. Replace the shadows with sense data. Replace the fire with your brainstem. And replace the prisoner with you. And here's the worst part. There's no escaping the cave. No ladder, no exit, no sunrise. Because this isn't just an illusion you were placed into. It's the only mechanism by which you exist. If the dream breaks, so do you. Now consider anesthesia. Entire hours, sometimes days, can pass without a trace. Not even dreams. You don't go anywhere. You don't float. You stop. Consciousness isn't paused. It's annihilated. There was no observer during that time. You vanish completely and then return, assuming nothing went wrong. You trust waking life because you can remember it. But memory is fragile, and anesthesia proves that memory is not required for time to pass. So here's the question that should haunt you. How would you know if this isn't a dream you won't wake from? How would you know if your real body is gone, your real world collapsed, and what you call consciousness now is just the fading echo of a mind stimulating its own survival? You wouldn't, because you've never truly been awake. Not once. You've only ever been convinced. And the voice telling you that this is real? Whose voice is it, really? The world that doesn't exist. Open your eyes, look around. This is the world, isn't it? Solid surfaces, objects with weight, a space filled with things, locations, people, colors, shapes. But this assumption that there's a world out there, independent of your senses, existing just as you perceive it, isn't supported by science or logic. It's a convenient delusion. Let's start with something obvious: color. You see red, blue, green, but those aren't properties of objects. They are interpretations of specific wavelengths of light your retina detects and your brain renders into experience. A strawberry is not red. It merely reflects light at around 700 nanometers. Your brain translates that into red. But in absolute terms, there is no color in the external world. Now go deeper. Touch something. A table, your arm. The sensation you feel is not contact. It's electric repulsion. At the atomic level, particles never truly touch. They repel each other due to electromagnetic forces. What you feel as pressure is a field denying access. You're floating, always. You have never touched anything in your life. You think the world is made of matter, solid stuff, but particles are 99.9999999% empty space. Atoms are mostly void. When you look around, you don't see the world as it is. You see a rendering, a simplified model generated by your brain for survival. You're not perceiving reality. You're hallucinating usefulness. Evolutionary theorist Donald Hoffman proposed a controversial but compelling idea. Organisms do not evolve to see the truth. They evolve to see what helps them survive. A species that sees truth but responds slowly dies off. A species that sees useful fictions thrives. According to his simulations, creatures that perceived reality accurately were outcompeted by those that hallucinated it in adaptive ways. You don't see what's real, you see what keeps you alive. Let's turn to physics. Quantum mechanics annihilates any belief in a fixed, independent reality. Particles behave as waves existing in superpositions, multiple states at once, until observed. Only then do they collapse into a defined outcome. This isn't speculation. It's repeatedly observed. The double-slit experiment is the most famous example. A single particle sent toward a screen behaves like a wave, interfering with itself, unless it is observed. The act of measurement changes the outcome. The observer alters reality. So what is the world before you observe it? Nothing. Or everything. Or something that can't be described. And if observation shapes reality, then what is reality without observers? Take this further. The object permanence you learned as a baby, the belief that objects exist even when not being looked at, is a developmental convenience. But physics doesn't guarantee it. If an electron doesn't have a definite position until it's measured, then your assumptions about permanence are delusions. And then there's time again. If the universe began with a Big Bang, as cosmologists believe, then everything you see, light, matter, motion, is just the unfolding of an initial quantum state. There is no now in the equations of physics. The laws describe relations, not events. You see things happening, but the universe might be static, frozen. You perceive motion because you are the motion, a brief flicker in space-time interpreting itself. Now take away your senses. Blindness, deafness, anesthesia, sensory deprivation, all erase parts of the world you assume are fundamental. In total darkness, silence, stillness, does the world still exist? You want to say yes, because it feels absurd to say otherwise. But remember, all you know about the world is filtered through a brain interpreting signals. Shut off the input and the world as you know it vanishes. You cannot access the thing in itself, not ever. This was Immanuel Kant's great insight. We do not experience the world as it is. We experience the world as it appears to us, shaped by our faculties, space, time, causality. Those are not features of the world. They are features of your mind. The real world, if it exists, is unknowable, forever. And so you construct a simulation, one that looks like a room, feels like a body, sounds like birdsong or traffic. But it's just a scaffold, a neural hallucination. And like all hallucinations, it can fracture. Hallucinogens do not introduce falsehood. They reveal the instability of your default model. Objects melt, time folds, identity dissolves. Reality slips because it was never nailed down. The brain can only stabilize perception through repetition and familiarity. But those are not guarantees, they're guesses. So when you say, I see the world, what you really mean is, I see what my brain believes is most likely to be true, based on memory and feedback loops and fear. You see your training, you see your culture, you see your limitations. But do you ever really see the world? You can't. You're trapped behind your eyes, watching shadows on a wall and calling it reality. And if the shadows are convincing enough, would it even matter if the world had already ended? Would you notice? The body that betrays you. You think your body is yours, that it belongs to you, obeys you, reflects you, that it's the boundary between self and world. But your body is not your vessel, it's your prison, and the guard lives inside the walls. Let's begin with betrayal. Your body began breaking down the moment it began forming. Even before you were born, your DNA carried built-in errors, copy mistakes from ancestors long dead. Cancer is not an outside invader. It is your own cells mutating, replicating, ignoring the commands you thought were sacred. Your immune system can turn on you. Your brain can destroy your muscles. Your gut can decide it hates certain foods and collapse into sepsis. You live under the illusion that you control this flesh, that your hand moves because you willed it. But the delay between your intention and the action is filled with chemical preambles, electrochemical thresholds, motor pattern activations, all initiated before your conscious mind reports the decision. You are not driving the vehicle. You are the passenger given fake controls. And even the sensation of movement is a lie. Consider phantom limb syndrome. Amputees still feel limbs that aren't there. They itch, they ache, they cramp. This proves something brutal. Your sense of body isn't tied to your actual physical form. It's tied to a neural map in your brain. When that map is intact, it doesn't matter what's missing. The pain still comes. You could be dismembered and still feel whole, or feel whole and still be dismembered. And then there's the Penfield experiments. When neuroscientist Wilder Penfield electrically stimulated regions of patients' brains during surgery, their bodies moved, hands lifted, legs kicked. But when asked why they moved, patients invented reasons. "I wanted to raise my arm," one said, even though the command had come from outside. Your mind doesn't control your body, it explains your body. Poorly. Now turn inward. Your organs operate in near total secrecy. You don't know the rhythms of your liver. You don't feel your kidneys filter blood. You can't sense your own heartbeat unless it fails. Your body is a black box that pretends to be a temple. Until it breaks, and it always breaks. Let's talk about decay. Every 7 years, your cells are almost completely replaced. You are a ship of Theseus made of meat. Bones wear down, telomeres fray, neurons misfire, memory erodes. The body does not age like a tree, slowly and gracefully. It ages like a glitching machine. Each breath costs something. Each heartbeat brings you closer to the last. Your skin, which you call your surface, is a writhing graveyard of bacteria and dead cells. You shed 30,000 skin cells every minute. Your body is in a constant state of rot, and yet you call this decaying husk me. But the worst betrayal is still deeper. The bacteria in your gut, those tiny passengers, outnumber your own cells. They digest your food, regulate your mood, influence your decisions. Studies have shown that changes in gut flora can impact anxiety, depression, even social behavior. You are not a singular entity, you are a colony, a walking ecosystem of organisms that do not share your goals. You are not alone in your own body. Even your thoughts, those sacred private thoughts, are modulated by hormones, blood sugar, circadian rhythms. Who you are changes with sleep, diet, temperature. Starve yourself and your values shift. Drug your system and your beliefs fracture. Inject testosterone into a body and watch confidence surge, aggression bloom. What then is you if it can be flipped like a switch? There are recorded cases of people undergoing full personality change after minor concussions. A man becomes religious after a head injury. A child loses empathy. A woman forgets her language. Not through trauma, but through chemistry, through pressure, through chance. You think you own your body, but would you still claim it if it turned on you? What if it refused to move? What if your limbs twisted with Parkinson's? What if your skin burned with fibromyalgia? What if your brain glitched and forced you to scream, or repeat, or see things no one else sees? Would you say, "This is still me"? Or would you whisper what many eventually do, those broken by dementia, by ALS, by locked-in syndrome? "This is not me. This is not who I am." But if your body can erase you, if it can overwrite you, then what part of you was ever real? And if your own flesh is just a malfunction away from making you unrecognizable, then how do you know it hasn't already happened? The memory that lies. Your life is made of memories, moments you cherish, moments that haunt, names, places, faces, threaded together into the illusion of a cohesive story. But what if that story was wrong? Not slightly wrong, completely fabricated. What if the very thing you use to define who you are was a liar? Let's start with what memory is not. It is not a recording. It is not a file stored in some mental cabinet waiting to be retrieved. Every time you recall a memory, your brain reconstructs it, reshapes it. It uses current emotions, social context, imagined details, even other memories to reassemble what it thinks happened. You don't remember the event. You remember the last time you remembered it. And with each replay, the original dies a little more. The work of Elizabeth Loftus shattered the idea of memory's reliability. In one of her most unsettling experiments, she implanted false memories of being lost in a shopping mall as a child into participants. Memories that never happened. With nothing more than suggestion and repetition, people believed the fiction. Some even added details, the color of the store, the feeling of panic, the hand that helped them. They felt real. They were not. And what about your most sacred memories? The day you fell in love, the death of someone you couldn't live without, the betrayal that broke you. Do you think those memories are immune to distortion? They are the most vulnerable, because emotion supercharges memory, and supercharged memories rewrite themselves the most. Now ask yourself, how much of your life actually happened? Your earliest memory? Probably false. Most first memories are constructed around stories told to us later. You remember the red tricycle, the scraped knee, the birthday cake, not because you experienced them, but because someone described them, and your brain built the imagery to match. We do this constantly, seamlessly, and memory doesn't just distort, it deletes. You forget nearly everything. The faces of people you once knew, the places you once called home, the sound of a parent's voice. Your brain sheds data constantly, like a body discarding dead skin. You lose who you were, bit by bit, day by day. But here's the horror. Even the forgetting is forgotten. You don't feel the loss. You feel complete. You always feel complete, as if this current version of you, the one reading this now, is the same person who cried in the schoolyard, or kissed someone in the dark, or screamed into a pillow in the middle of the night. But you are not. You are a new assembly, a new narrator, with incomplete notes. You are not remembering your life. You are interpreting fragments. Let's go deeper. Déjà vu. That unsettling glitch when you feel you've lived a moment before. It isn't magic. It's a temporal mismatch in your memory system. A delay in processing causes your brain to register the present as already remembered. A brief rupture in the illusion of linear time. It proves something you rarely admit. Your brain can't even keep now and then straight. And then there's memory reconsolidation. Every time a memory is recalled, it becomes temporarily unstable, rewritable. This means your most sacred memories, your joys, your traumas, have been edited hundreds of times, by mood, by belief, by trauma. You may have reprocessed a betrayal into something noble. You may have repressed abuse so deeply, it's disappeared entirely. What parts of your story are real? Or rather, can any part of a story made of broken data be called real? Consider the Mandela effect. Groups of people collectively misremember facts, logos, quotes, events. Luke, I am your father was never said. The Monopoly man never had a monocle. These are trivial, yes, but they reveal something chilling. Memory is not personal. It's communal. And when the community remembers wrong, you are more likely to trust them than your own senses. You'd rather join a hallucination than stand alone in truth. Now ask yourself, if your entire sense of identity is built from memory, and memory is fluid, unstable, and often fabricated, what exactly are you? A collage, a rumor, a whisper? And if your memories were erased tonight, everyone, would you still exist? Would you still be the same entity, worthy of your name, your regrets, your promises? Or would you just be a body with no soul, a story with no reader, a ghost that never lived at all? The others you invented. You are not alone, or at least you think you're not. You live surrounded by others, family, friends, enemies, lovers, strangers. You talk to them, you hear their voices, you imagine their inner worlds. But have you ever truly seen another person? Have you ever reached past the skin, the voice, the behaviors, and touched something real? Or are you simply hallucinating people the way your brain hallucinates objects, time, and self? Let's begin with a truth you never want to believe. You do not perceive people, you perceive models of people. Your brain constructs internal avatars based on facial expressions, speech patterns, prior knowledge, and context. These mental representations are not those individuals. They are sketches generated in real time, constantly updated, and more often than not, wildly inaccurate. You don't see who someone is. You see what your mind predicts they might be. And when those predictions fail, when someone betrays you, surprises you, dies, you feel that sense of collapse. The model failed. The hallucination cracked. Now go deeper. Theory of mind, the ability to infer that others have thoughts, beliefs, desires independent of your own, is considered a fundamental trait of human consciousness. But it is a guess, a gamble. You have no access to their minds. You cannot feel their suffering. You cannot touch their memories. You assume they are conscious because they behave like you do, but that assumption can fail, and it does. Psychopathy is one such failure. People with this condition understand that others have mental states, but they don't feel the emotional weight. They mimic empathy, they perform kindness, but there is no shared emotional core, just simulation, cold reading, empty gesture. Which raises the question, how many of the others around you are just echoes, mimics? And how many are you projecting onto, injecting consciousness where there is only reaction? Take the solipsism problem, the philosophical idea that you can never be certain anyone else exists in the way you do. You can't prove it. The only consciousness you have direct access to is your own. Everything else is interpretation, behavior decoded into belief. You are locked in a chamber of mirrors. Now consider Capgras delusion, a rare but devastating condition where a person believes that a loved one has been replaced by an identical imposter. The face is the same, the voice is the same, but something is wrong. The emotional recognition fails, the internal model shatters, and with it goes the relationship. It proves something terrifying. Love, recognition, connection all depend on a neural trick, a wiring of familiarity. And when that wire is cut, the person is erased, even as their body remains. So who are your loved ones really? Connections or reflexes? Let's examine language again. You say, I understand you. But what you really mean is, I've mapped your words onto a concept I already believe. Misunderstanding is the rule, not the exception. How often have you argued with someone only to realize you weren't even talking about the same thing? You weren't debating, they were hallucinating you while you hallucinated them. So what happens when everyone you know is a construct? A fictional character written in the language of assumption. Even empathy, the jewel of human morality, is rooted in simulation. Mirror neurons fire when you see someone in pain, but they're not feeling their pain. They're firing based on your experience of what that pain might be like. You aren't empathizing with them. You're empathizing with your own hallucination of their suffering, which means you love your version of them, not them, because them is inaccessible, a black box with a smile on the surface. So ask yourself this, how many relationships in your life are based not on truth, but on internal storytelling? How many arguments were with people who don't exist? At least not as you've painted them. How much of your social world is just a novel you wrote and decided to live in? And when someone dies, what do you mourn? The body, the voice, or the collapsing fiction you built around them? And if they were always a story, always a character in your theater, then what happens when the stage goes dark? Was there ever anyone else? Or have you always been alone, waiting for the other actors to wake up, not realizing you're the only one who ever did? The time that doesn't pass. You live in time. You wake, you age, you die. You feel it flowing, a steady, merciless current dragging everything you love into memory, then oblivion. You imagine the past as fixed, the future as open, the present as real. But none of this is true. Time is not what you think it is. In fact, it may not exist at all. Let's begin with your experience. You feel time as a river, but what you actually experience is change, not time itself, the ticking of a clock, the shifting of light, the sound of a heartbeat. These are signals your brain strings together to simulate movement through something it cannot perceive directly. Remove change, silence, stillness, isolation, and time disappears. You felt it, those empty hours that stretch forever, or those moments that vanish in a blink. Your perception of time is elastic, unreliable, and deeply flawed. Your internal clock can be warped by heat, drugs, fear, boredom, trauma. A minute in terror feels longer than an hour in routine. A lifetime of memory can feel like it's collapsing into a single flash just before death. So what, then, is the true duration of a moment, and how many have already been lost? Let's go to physics. Einstein showed us that time is not universal. It bends, warps, stretches. Under general relativity, time moves slower in strong gravity. Astronauts in orbit age slower than people on Earth. This isn't a theory, it's been measured. Your GPS wouldn't work without correcting for time dilation. So your now is not my now. There is no global clock, no unified present, which means there is no single reality, just infinite slices of space-time, each from a different vantage point, each believing its version is the real one. Every observer is trapped in their own timeline. And if time is relative, dependent on motion, gravity, and location, then what does it mean to say something happened? Happened when? Happened for whom? Let's go further. In the equations of physics, both classical and quantum, there is no arrow of time. The formulas work forwards and backwards equally. They do not prefer a direction. Time's flow is not embedded in nature. It is a consequence of entropy, the gradual increase of disorder. But entropy doesn't explain why you experience time moving forward. It doesn't explain memory, consciousness, causality. It only describes statistical probability. You remember the past not because it's fixed, but because remembering the future would be less useful to your survival. Your brain tricks you into believing time moves forward because forward is where the food is, and the danger. Let's unmake the past. Every memory you have is reconstructed. Every historical fact is recorded by flawed witnesses. The past is not fixed. It is a story constantly rewritten by biology, politics, and belief. Even the dates you know, your birth, your childhood, your losses, exist only because someone wrote them down. But remove those stories, and what is left of before? Now look ahead. You imagine the future. You build hopes, fears, calendars, deadlines, but the future is always a fiction. It exists only as a mental simulation. There are no future events, only models of possible outcomes. Time then becomes a loop, a recursion. You reflect on the past to predict the future, and live neither. The present becomes a blur, an ever-vanishing moment you can never quite hold. And yet you build your identity on this illusion. You say, I was that person, but that person is dead. You've changed, you've forgotten, you've betrayed your former self 1,000 times. And you say, I will become this person, but that person hasn't been born. They will inherit what you've broken or forgotten. What links these ghosts together? Memory, biology, a name? You have no continuity, only a timestamp stamped onto a passing state. So let's ask the only question that remains. If time is not absolute, not flowing, not even real, then what are you waiting for? What are you aging into? What are you dying from? And if the past never existed, and the future never arrives, then where exactly are you right now? The choice you never had. You believe in free will. You believe that you, a conscious mind, make decisions, that you choose your actions, that you weigh options, that you are the author of your life. It's not just a belief, it's the foundation of morality, justice, identity. But that foundation is made of sand. Let's begin with neuroscience. In the 1980s, Benjamin Liebe ran a now famous experiment. Participants were asked to flex their wrist whenever they felt like it. At the same time, their brain activity was recorded. The results? A surge of electrical activity, the readiness potential, began hundreds of milliseconds before the participant reported the conscious decision to move. The brain made the choice before you became aware of it. You are not the spark, you are the witness arriving late to the fire. Follow-up experiments confirm this again and again. Modern studies with fMRI scans can predict a person's decision, left or right button press, up to 10 seconds before they consciously know what they will choose. So what exactly is your will? Is it a voice shouting into the void, or an echo desperately rationalizing the noise of neurons? Let's turn to biology. Every decision you've ever made emerged from a brain shaped by evolution, genes, trauma, hunger, hormones. You didn't choose your DNA. You didn't choose your childhood. You didn't choose your brain's dopamine receptor density, your stress responses, your attachment patterns. You didn't even choose the language in which your thoughts arise. So when you say, I chose, what you mean is, my machinery processed the variables and produced an output. Free will is the name you give to post hoc narration, the story your mind tells itself to maintain the illusion of control. But let's go darker. Imagine flipping a coin. Heads, you betray someone you love. Tails, you stay loyal. You flip the coin and it lands on heads. You feel sick. But what if at that moment you felt you couldn't have done otherwise? That the betrayal was always going to happen? You'd call it fate, or compulsion, or madness. But this isn't a thought experiment. In brain injury cases, people lose impulse control. A teacher starts downloading illegal content after developing a brain tumor. A husband becomes violent after a head injury. When the tumor is removed, behavior normalizes. When the lesion heals, the person returns. Were they guilty? Were they ever truly themselves? What if you're not either? And then there's the illusion of alternatives. When you think about making a choice, you weigh options. But every option is imagined by the brain that already prefers one over the others. Your preferences are not neutral. They're biases shaped by everything you've ever consumed, feared, lost, desired. Even your ability to consider an option is dictated by prior conditions. You never had a real menu, only the one your brain printed for you. So what does it mean to be responsible, to be guilty, to be heroic? If you do something kind, it's because of chemicals, upbringing, moments outside your control. If you do something monstrous, it's the same. But the world needs the illusion. We punish, we reward, we must, because society can't function otherwise. So we pretend. We pretend the actor is free. We pretend the guilty chose. We pretend the hero could have done otherwise. But underneath that, we know. We feel it when we can't stop ourselves. We sense it when we act on impulse. We whisper it when we're asked, "Why did you do that?" "I don't know," we say, because we don't. And we never did. So if you didn't choose your thoughts, your values, your personality, if you didn't choose to be born, to want, to suffer, to exist, then what is the self that chooses? And if there is no self behind the curtain, only gears and ghosts, then who exactly is reading this now? The self that never was. You say I dozens of times a day. I feel tired. I want more. I remember. I am. But who is speaking? Where is this I located? In your chest? In your head? Behind your eyes? Is it a voice? A perspective? A pattern? Or is it just a word? Let's begin with the mirror. You've looked at yourself countless times, seen the same face, the same skin, the same eyes. But the person you see isn't you. It's an image, a reversed version, distorted by lighting, filtered by memory and emotion. Others never see that version. You never see what they see, and neither of you sees what you actually are, because there is nothing to see, just shifting expressions on a decaying surface. But it gets worse. The brain has no center. There is no core of you, no command tower. Neuroscience has mapped the mind and found modules. Language here, memory there, vision over here. But the integration, the unity you call me, is an illusion. What you call the self is a temporary agreement between systems, a fleeting coherence. Split brain studies prove this brutally. In patients whose corpus callosum is severed, the bridge between the brain's hemispheres, strange things happen. The left hand reaches for a shirt, the right hand rejects. One hand closes a door, the other keeps opening. When asked why the left hand did something, the left hemisphere, which controls speech, makes up a reason, unaware of the real cause. One brain, two selves, each unaware of the other. So how many selves are you? Are you the angry version of yourself in traffic? The gentle one who cries at films? The liar? The dreamer? The one who wants to live forever? the one who sometimes wants to disappear, you are all of them, and none. There is no thread running through your story. Memory is fragmented. Personality shifts. Morality evolves. Beliefs mutate. You've said that doesn't sound like me, even though it was you who did it. And if it was you then, but it's not you now, then what was the constant? Your body, replaced molecule by molecule. Your mind, shaped by trauma, love, dopamine, language. Your identity, a reaction to the environment. Maybe you are not a being. Maybe you are a process, a swirl of inputs and feedback loops, like a whirlpool, recognizable in shape, but never the same water. And if the shape stops forming, what remains? Now turn to Buddhism. Anatta, the doctrine of no self. It teaches that clinging to a permanent self is the root of suffering, that what we call identity is merely a bundle of sensations, perceptions, thoughts, and consciousness, called the skandhas, none of which, alone or together, constitute a fixed soul. Science catches up centuries later. Cognitive psychologist Bruce Hood writes, "The self is an illusion. It doesn't exist in the way we think. It's useful for survival, for social behavior, for continuity, but useful is not the same as real. The history that never happened." You live in the present, shaped by the past. You believe in history, dates, events, revolutions, empires. You think you know how you got here, that the world around you is the consequence of cause and effect, carefully recorded in books, museums, timelines. But history isn't a record, it's a weapon. It's a story told by the last one standing. Let's begin with forgetting. Entire civilizations have vanished without explanation. The Indus Valley, the Olmecs, Göbekli Tepe. Cities buried, languages lost, belief systems erased. We dig up fragments, pottery, bones, walls, and guess. We tell ourselves we understand, but we don't. We interpret scraps with modern minds and call it reconstruction. You wouldn't understand a text message from 200 years in the future. What makes you think you've understood the past? Now think of records. We believe in the power of documents, but most of history was never written down. What was recorded was filtered by priests, kings, conquerors. Archives were destroyed, rewritten, translated into new myths. Every text you've read is a survivor of fire, bias, and convenience. The Library of Alexandria once held hundreds of thousands of scrolls. One night of flames erased millennia. How much of your species' mind was incinerated while someone watched and said, "It doesn't matter"? What you call history is what's left after power silences memory. And even when records survive, they lie. Christopher Columbus never proved the earth was round. It had been known for centuries. But the myth persisted because it made colonization sound like enlightenment. The Trojan War, more myth than fact. The Exodus, no archaeological support. Jesus of Nazareth, no contemporary evidence outside of later religious texts. But the stories endured, and in enduring, they shaped billions of lives. You are the product of lies that calcified into truth. Now think of time again. Chronology is not linear. History is not a ladder. It's a shattered mirror. Things repeat. They echo. Revolutions mimic revolutions. Tyrants copy tyrants. You look at photos from the 1800s, and they feel ancient. But those people bled like you, laughed like you, had regrets, diseases, memories. You separate from them to avoid collapsing into insignificance. But there is no separation. History isn't then, it's now unprocessed. You think the Middle Ages ended? They didn't. Their power structures live in your politics. Their cruelty lives in your prisons. Their superstition lives in your algorithms. What you call progress is often just rebranded repetition, and the victors write it all down. Now consider collective memory. Countries rewrite their past. America calls genocide manifest destiny. Britain calls theft empire. Japan erases wartime atrocities from textbooks. Every nation sanitizes its sins. Every culture builds pride from forgetting. So what you know of the past, who decided it, whose bones were silenced, whose names were deleted, the end that never ends. You want it to stop. The questions, the collapsing certainty, the unraveling of self. You hope that at the end of all this, something waits. A final answer, a conclusion, an escape hatch. But there is no ending. Only the illusion of one. Let's begin with the narrative. Stories have beginnings, middles, ends. You were raised on this rhythm. Birth, life, death. Problem, struggle, resolution. You apply this structure to everything, even your life, even your death. But life doesn't follow structure. It bleeds. The world doesn't end. It mutates. You don't finish. You scatter. Now consider death again. You imagine a final breath, a boundary, a quiet nothing. But physics doesn't support that. Matter doesn't end. It transforms. Consciousness fades, but neurons still fire. Bodies rot, but cells divide. Time doesn't pause for endings. It never did. Now look at your thoughts. You try to stop them. You meditate. You beg for stillness. But thought continues. The inner voice, the restless eye, the ache beneath the rib cage. Silence is not absence. It's waiting. Even now, something in you resists this moment. The mind is searching for a foothold, for meaning. But what if meaning is the first lie, the one that gave birth to all the others? Now ask yourself, what would an ending even look like? Darkness? Silence? Peace? But darkness can be measured, silence can be pierced, and peace is just the name you give to absence when it doesn't scare you. Now turn to recursion. Every section you've read folds into the next. Every idea reflects the last. Every revelation unravels itself. The collapse never completes. It loops, like thought, like time, like you. You are not a story. You are a recursion, not a life, but the memory of one. And now, look around. You are not where you thought you'd be. Not the same person who began this, and yet, you're still here. Still listening, still hoping. But for what? There is no closure, no final truth, no clean exit. Only a mirror you can't turn away from. So now ask the question you've been avoiding. If there is no ending, then what is it that just ended? You have arrived, not at an answer, not at peace, only at the edge where thought devours itself, where truth unthreads, where the mirror stops reflecting, because there is nothing left to reflect. You searched for meaning, but you found a voice that dismantled you. You followed a path, but the path circled inward until you discovered you were never walking, only falling. And the deeper you fell, the more you became what you were always running from. The illusion of self, the ghost of memory, the thought of pretending to be a thinker. There is no ending. There is only this, a silence so complete, it sounds like the truth.